Hello. Um, this is a little different for me because I've never done this before, but sort of. I actually made this PowerPoint and showed it to a few employees. Um, but I'm just going to share it on my account. So this is a PowerPoint about Eden, the Edenic account, and one particular part of Eden, the fall of man, as I right there, with a particular focus on the fruit, um, but as is it's the fall of man and how we get back up. And there's I believe, Donnie McClarkin, that famous song, which I love. I love that song. Okay, so uh, as the Bible says, when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, it had a pleasing appearance. Emphasis on pleasing appearance, because as I've come to understand, as I've come to see in this world, we value appearance over truth. Truth is down here, appearance is up here. Um, and this is basically one of the first clues. It had a pleasing appearance. A lot of people don't know even the difference between appearance and truth. They think that isn't the truth apparent? Isn't that just what it is? But anyway, she took the fruit because it was pretty. But as we see, William Shakespeare says, all that glitters is not gold. All right, let's break down this fruit. Before we do that, let's look at this um, small video about Sweeby.
Another time, there was a famous master called Suibi, and he was asked, what is the secret teaching of Buddhism? And he was asked this in the lecture hall, where other monks were studying. And he said, wait till there's no one around and I'll tell you. So later in the day, the monk accosted him and said, there's nobody around now. What is the secret teaching of Buddhism? So he went into the garden with this monk, and he pointed at the bamboos. And the monk said, I don't understand. He said, what a tall one that is, what a short one that is. And this awakened the monk.
So yeah, that tiny little clip pretty much explains it. It explains it intellectually, of course, but let me break it down for you even further. What a small one that is, and what a tall one that is. What an A one that is, and what a Z one that is. What a black one that is, and what a white one that is. What a weak one that is, and what a strong one that is. What a heavy one that is, and what a light one that is. What a dark one that is, and what a bright one that is. What an off one that is, and what an on one that is. What a wrong one that is, and what a right one that is. What an evil one that is, and what a good one that is. And on it goes. This is the fruit. This is what it means to have eaten fruit, and this is the fall of man. What has happened? It's called the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but and I sort of realized this. Um, it's not really about good and evil at all. It's about opposites. All of these are opposites. That is the teaching of Sweeby. That's why he awakened. What a small one that is, and what a tall one that is. These are just opposites. You can place any two things and make them opposites of each other. Um, and that is what the knowledge of good and evil is, knowledge of opposites, which is basically relativism. You could also say, but I specifically like to call this type of knowledge duality. Small and tall are completely arbitrary, except in relation to each other. Before we separated small and tall, things were just what they were. They were not understood in relation to an opposite. So you have the small, you have the tall, but now that the fruit has been eaten, and now that we're trapped in this duality, this relativism, we must separate the two. We we can only see them as opposites of each other, and thus we are fallen. That's what happened. For the Edenic account, we did not separate things. Everything was one. Life was one. All life was one. We only knew God. But now that we ate the fruit, and eating the fruit is not a physical thing, it's all up here. It is a psychological thing. That is the fruit. You could say it is that which allows you to, you know, sort of experiment with this new phenomenon of opposites, this phenomenon of relativism, but also the phenomenon of separateness. Because before the fruit, we were in a state of oneness, but now we're in a dualistic state after the fruit. After eating fruit, now things are separate. Because in dualism, things cannot be one, things have to be separated, because things can only be understood uh, in a relative way, meaning there needs to be at least two things to um, have a differentiation. And those two things are always in polar opposites, positive and negative, tall and small, uh, on and on and on, as I said. Yep. So that's the fallen state. So there are a couple of things that um, came of this fruit, so to speak. What is the fruit? As Jesus said, you will know them by their fruits, by the things that they do, by the things that they produce, by the things that they give birth to. That is the fruit. What comes from this sort of process of relativism, of separateness, of opposites, of duality. Well, one of them, and I suppose the main one, is the birth of the shadow, which I will make several videos going further into detail about this, but just to touch upon it here, um, shadow is sort of a contradictory phenomenon because it is a darkness, but it also is a light. Um, and there you go. That's the dualistic opposite. It is both dark and light. Now, the interesting thing about the shadow, it can only exist in this dualistic state, this relativistic state, where you need opposites, or where opposites are meaningful, I should say. Uh, the shadow needs light, but it can't have too much light. If it has too much light, it dies. It ceases to exist. Because obviously the light will blot out all of the darkness. No more darkness, no more shadow. But shadow cannot be fully darkness. If it's fully dark, it will also die. It needs light to exist. It needs some sort of light source. And so it is both. You can say, technically, it's not necessarily the birth of even the shadow, it's the birth of the walking, breathing, thinking, living contradiction. And that is the essence of the shadow. It is a contradictory phenomenon. And that is one of the fruits of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Again, much more on this later because there's so much more to say on the shadow, but just touching on it. Another birth child of the fruit is this thing called the serpent. Now, the serpent was technically there already. It is what convinced Eve to eat the fruit, right? But the serpent is also um, sort of it's an ongoing phenomenon of this separate state, this relativistic state, because it is the thing that not only convinces you to eat the fruit, but it's the thing that will continuously justify staying in this state. You can learn more about this quote unquote serpent by studying actual physical snakes, as I have. Now, is that what the serpent means? No. Serpent, again, I can make tons of videos about that as well. It's obviously symbolic. Yet and still, you can learn a lot about the symbolic, what the Bible calls the serpent, the thing that tricked Eve into eating the fruit. You can learn a lot about it by studying the physical snake. Um, Look at the snake. Study the snake. The snake has no arms, has no legs, has no teeth, does not chew its food, swallows it whole. Uh, and yet, without appendages, without fingers, without hands, without limbs, it can yet do all of these things. It can climb, it can swim, um, and it can, well, it can't walk, but it can travel, it can slither. Um, and then this one, which is one of my favorites, it's called sidewinding. Apparently, the snakes can travel probably, I haven't verified this, but I heard about 18 miles an hour. When you look at the pattern, the tracks, it's like curling its body in a very particular, peculiar way. It's almost like it's hopping from place to place. It's not going in a straight line in the desert here. It's moving in this way because there is a wisdom to it. And you can tell if you study this movement that it didn't learn this sort of movement overnight. This was something that the snake slowly developed, right? Maybe it's to increase the speed of traveling in the desert. Maybe it can be multiple reasons. I also thought, well, maybe it's this particular movement because if it just went in a straight line, then its body would burn in the sand. Maybe this sort of travel in this way makes it better on its body, so to speak. Um, but yeah, sidewinding is quite interesting. And again, it can wrap itself around things. It could turn itself into any shape it wants. Serpent, snake, is a liquid creature. Yes, it has a spine and all of that, but yet it can sort of mold itself into anything it wants. It can fashion itself into any shape and into any sort of in any into any structure it wants to be. It's the liquid nature of the snake, which also transfers to the serpent. Now, by contrast, the dove, not as liquid, right? Doves are diurnal and they are, well, they can fly. What I wanted to point out here in this image particularly is how the dove, when it is flying, the wings are extended. The feathers are just extensions of its own body, its own being. And it is able to sort of be uh, reveal itself. It's almost as if to say, "Here I am, and I'm here because I have nothing to hide." Snake, in contrast, is lowly, right? It's on the ground. It's mostly nocturnal. It does not want to be seen. It generally likes to hide itself. Uh, and of course, when you compare it further, um, a snake is a cold-blooded creature. It lays eggs like the dove, but it's not exactly the best parent. With the exception of pythons, perhaps, the only kind of um, maternal snake that there is, because the python stays with her eggs until her babies hatch. But that's an exception. Most snakes lay their eggs and then they just go away. It has a reptile brain, meaning it is completely selfish, which is an aspect of, for sure, the serpent, that biblical serpent, that symbolic serpent, which can be seen in the physical. The dove, on the other hand, again, uh, it is diurnal. It's active during the day, and they're great parents. They take care of their babies, and obviously that is a selfless act. And they're also vegetarian. Snakes, I don't know if there are any vegetarian snakes. I don't think there are. Generally, they're eating other creatures, right? But they are not incompatible. What did Jesus say? Be as wise as serpents and innocent as doves. But as I've learned, this is not exactly um, be as wise as serpents. More so to be wise to the serpent. Meaning, when the serpent comes to you with its lies, be wise enough to recognize the serpent, be wise enough to recognize the serpent's lies, and be wise enough to not fall for them. That is why you should be as wise as the serpent. That is not to say to mimic the serpent, that is to say to recognize it, to recognize how it works. Now, when you look at this image, again, appearance over truth, appearance over truth, appearance over truth. That is what this planet and the people on this planet say. And so when someone looks at something like this, they say, oh, appearance. It appears that the serpent is a superior creature to the dove. Here it is eating the dove. Of course, the eater is greater than the ET. Or so we think, or so the appearance would make us think, right? But is that the case? Here we have the lion and we have tall grass. Which is superior? Well, people will say, again, because we are appearance over truth here on this planet, they're immediately going to say, I mean, how ridiculous can you be? The lion is obviously superior. The lion tramples the grass. The lion eats that which eats the grass. The lion has claws, it has muscles, it has power, it's vicious, it's a beast. And the grass is just there. It can't even, it's barely animated, can't even move, can't eat anything. It doesn't have power, it doesn't have muscles, it doesn't have weapons, claws, and fangs. So, of course, the lion is superior. That is what people will say. The lion is the king of the jungle. Yet, when you look at this image, it's actually the king is at the bottom. When you look at it not from the outside, which is appearance, when you look at it from the inside, your perspective can change. Look at the inside of the lion. What is what are the lion's insides? The so-called king of the jungle. It is a beast, yes, but the reason why it's so terrifying is because of the hunger. It is the hunger that causes the beast to be so terrifying. It is ravenous, just hungry. It's always on the prowl. When a lion is next to you, when you're in a close proximity to it, when you're in an enclosed space to it, you're terrified. Why? Because you don't want to be eaten, and you know the lion is hungry. The beast is always hungry. Why is the beast always hungry? Well, because it always has to hunt, and there's no food. It doesn't have access to the all-you-can-eat buffet. It has to hunt. It has to work. It has to toil, and it's constant, and it's ongoing, and it's over and over and over and over and over. And it doesn't know if it's going to eat today or tomorrow or when it's going to eat next. So yes, it's always hungry. Um, and so it has these fangs in its muscles and the terrifying appearance, but it has to because it has a job to do. It's called hunting. The grass, in comparison, when we look at its insides, it is laid back, like me. It has no need for muscles, fangs. It has no need to work over and over and over. Why? Because it's not hungry. It can make its own food. So when you look at the inside of the grass, it is actually superior. The outside, you could say the lion is superior. When you look at the inside is what matters. That is what's superior. That which can make its own food is superior to that which cannot. That which must toil for its food and doesn't know when its next meal is going to come from. The grass, in contrast, doesn't care because it knows it can make its own food. So it can just lay back in the cut and relax and just, be without being hungry and being fearful of, oh, where's my next meal going to come from? Or needing to take a meal through force and through death from another organism is uh, technically not self-sufficient, but far more self-sufficient than any beast. Therefore, it is far superior to any beast. So, coming back to the snake and the dove. It eats the dove. Does that mean it wins? Well, about Jesus. Jesus didn't eat. You could say he was eaten. And there are many people in history where, again, if we're focusing on appearance, if we're focusing on the outer, it seems as though they've lost. But I urge people, I urge you, if you're listening, to look on the insides. It's the insides that count. What do the insides say? Not the appearance. What does the truth say? And is there a truth that outweighs the appearance, that outweighs the outer, of what something looks like? Now, this is a little departure. We're almost at the, I think, 3 slides left. Um, in this world of appearance over truth, we don't like to hear the truth. And so here I have a few people who do like to speak, at least what they consider their truth. I'm not saying that what comes out of their mouth or what comes from their being is true, but they are certainly whistleblowers. Um, and they are attacked for speaking out. And you should always be mindful of whenever anyone says anything and is attacked for it, prosecuted for it. Because do you really think the devil is going to want the truth to be spoken? After all, why was Jesus killed? Was it not because he spoke the truth? You think when the authorities came to him, when the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the teachers of religious law, and the Romans came to him and said, "Hey, stop doing these things that we don't like you doing." If Jesus said, "Okay, I'll stop, I'll shut up, I'll go back home, I'll lay low, I'll tuck my lantern under the bed and close the blinds," you think that they would have prosecuted him still? No, of course not. So, say all that just to say to be mindful of the truth. Um, well, not the truth of, well, the truth too, of course, but of speech being suppressed because perhaps there's some truth being said if someone is being prosecuted for speaking out. Uh, I put Jaguar in there, but lately she is. It's as if she's becoming more and more imbalanced, which is unfortunate. And this is not a. I'm not here to judge these people, but I'm just saying the two here that I really love the most are Aaron and Julian. Um, because they seem to really truly go to bat for the truth the most, and they have been prosecuted the most. Snowden, of course, uh, Mr. Snowden is unfortunately afraid to be prosecuted, so he's running away. He's still running away. Suppose Jaguar is not afraid. That I can give her props for. She has cojones for real. Um, but yeah, look for the truth. It's probably where any speech is being suppressed. That's really all that this slide is ultimately supposed to say. My personal feelings of these people are not terribly important. So again, um, this world values appearance over truth. And as I said, or did I say it? I don't know. I don't remember. But a lot of people don't even know the difference. Um, they think that the truth is apparent. They think that the truth is obvious. I think it's there. It's instant. It's the first thing that they see. They think, that's the truth. Whatever's prima facie. That must be the truth. But it's just appearance. It is eye candy. It is smoke and mirrors. It is a mask. It is a painted face. It is ego. Social capital. Popularity. But it's not the truth. And it's high time that we start to switch our choice of judging or valuing appearance over truth and start valuing truth over appearance, which means no more smoke and mirrors, no more masks, no more thinking that social capital is what is important in this world. You can have all the social capital in the world and be the poorest soul. If you are not walking, basking in the light of God, which is truth. So back to William Shakespeare here. In the famous play of Hamlet, we're asked to be or not to be. Now, this is the question. And really getting back to it, this is how we get back up. What is this question, to be or not to be? So let me break it down. To be or not to be. Open, transparent, honest, truthful, authentic, a true reflection of yourself, of your innards, not your outers. Are you reflecting your inner self, your essence? Who you are when nobody else is looking? Who you are when the camera is not rolling? Can you be that? To be or not to be naked? And how ironic, finger is naked, no clothes. How lovely. How appropriate. In other words, to be or not to be. The child. Playful and imaginative, curious and investigative, expressive, full of energy and life, pure, innocent, authentic. That is why Jesus praised children. Kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Yes. Those who seek the truth, the inners, not the outers. And if you seek that yourself, you too will be handed that kingdom. This is not a Christian thing. This is not a religious thing. This is just a true thing. And just a few of my thoughts and feelings about, again, the Adenic account, fall of man, how we get back up. We get back up by being that, going within, finding that inner child that's still in there, That is the dove that Jesus spoke of. We all have that. We all have that inner child. We all have these qualities because our inner child has these qualities. Um, and a lot of people are doves uh, on this planet, but perhaps they are still figuring out the serpent part, and that is, unfortunately, it's not enough to be a dove. Um, you have to learn from the serpent as well. The serpent is actually the teacher. Um, we should bow to the serpent. We should, well, not bow to the serpent, but we should thank the serpent because it's there to teach us. And that's not a bad thing. Um, but yeah, more on serpents and shadows and all of these things later. But this is just a small, quick PowerPoint to sort of introduce these things and uh, to make another video of, you know, the inner workings of my mind and my spiritual path. But more later.